Well, we started it at Dogfish Bay.
This is the kind of thing we do. So we started from the perspective that, of course, we're going to take off and spend several months walking somewhere through the Alaska wilderness.
I did do a trip to Miley Glacier, and we did a trip around Cook Inlet.
Where do I think I'm going to find a lot of interesting stuff to learn? And Cook Inlet, being on the coast, it let us walk beaches and use pack rafts, which is something that's fairly feasible to do with the kids.
For thousands of years, that is how we existed. We took our children with us everywhere. And since when do we have to not include our children? Since when is it not okay to say we're going to go as a family and do something?
How do you work together as a family and do things that make sense for everyone, you know, and that satisfy everyone's needs, I guess.
As far as my understanding of it is that they investigate different environmental issues by actually going there and putting feet on the ground and poking around and seeing what they find. And it's a really novel approach. It's a lot different than reading something that somebody from DC wrote about an issue, you know, with the dollars that they got from whatever special interest group. But they were actually there and, you know, walked around and talked to the people and have a different understanding of what's going on.
We asked pretty much anyone we met what they thought were the big changes in store for Alaska in the next 50 years or so, next couple generations, trying to get out beyond that kind of immediate political cycle, the controversies of the moment.
But if you get out in the bush, especially the spots that they're going through, you can meet some real interesting people. So I think that just the idea of going out and meeting them, you know, to ask them where they'd like to see Alaska go, probably nobody's ever asked them that. I mean, they have politicians representing them, but nobody's ever asked them that question.
It's phenomenal, and they push themselves physically and mentally, and they really open my eyes, and they help connect me to this place through their pictures and their stories.
When my brother graduated with his PhD, they moved from Seattle to Alaska, and they did that on foot.
Because we've actually been living in a tent for a year, walking from Seattle to the Aleutian Islands. And when you're walking for a year, you have a lot of time to think, where do I want to go next? And we visited a lot of communities, thought a lot about it, and decided to settle here.
Turns out they came back to stay and put up their yurt, and after walking up from Seattle, they settled in, and it's wonderful. Really a mom's dream come true to have my kids and grandkids right here.
we pretty much at the point where we moved here, we figured that any place we lived where we didn't have to move out every day and that we could heat would be like this gigantic step up in life.
The kids are having a wonderful, wonderful experience growing up, traveling around like that.
We walk slower.
Yeah, we definitely walk
That's
slower.
really how our life has changed with children. And, you know, and in some ways I really mean that, because I think that, you know, we had this life and all the things that we valued and spent time doing before we had kids are things we still do. And some of those things we've had to adapt for our kids, like walking slower.
We start out any trip with, you know, just all sorts of ideas, and there are all these interesting places to see, and Cook Inlet is definitely one of them. I mean, it's got, you know, amazing big tidal currents and mountains right down to the ocean and stuff like this. But that sort of, when we were at that level and discussing this trip, it was like, actually Erin was really advocating for it, and I was like not quite so into it. And when it really gelled, for me at least, is when we started talking about the human dimensions of this trip. And Cook Inlet has an amazing diversity of communities around it. There are remote native communities. There's Anchorage, Alaska's largest city. We have big industrial facilities. Our own community is right on Cook Inlet. It's a really, really diverse place in human terms. And then that diversity is matched by the wilderness, and then with the interaction that those people have with that wilderness. And I thought that's kind of what tied it together for me as a trip.
I think a lot of these ideas have come from her in some ways. I mean, that's one thing that's always been kind of a pet peeve of hers, is everybody thinks she's going with him.
They're going to be whining, and they're going to be bored, and God knows what's going to happen to them. But I just can't imagine it working. To me, it's just inconceivable to take two kids. It's bad enough just taking a partner with you, not alone two kids.
So I think they devised this trip so that it would incorporate lots of rafting and coastal hiking. So it wouldn't be a lot of inland bushwhacking or difficult hiking for the children.
What makes a good adventure? Well, for me, a good adventure is, well, something that I come back from okay, you know, like I survived it. And you know, I wasn't hurt. Nobody I was with was hurt. So that's kind of the first thing. And then next, it should have been interesting and stimulating in some sense, that you know, maybe I was scared once or twice, but I overcame any difficulties. More specifically, I'd want a good adventure to have a variety of different landscapes and different terrain.
A normal person would sit around and say, well, that's just crazy. Why would you take a little baby and a little 3-year-old on this big trip? Why would you do that? That makes no sense as a parent. But then here I am walking with them, looking at Katmai, looking at Latuya. She was in diapers at the time. And here's Katmai, not even 5 years old, and he's climbing up rocks and cliffs. And I'm thinking, oh dear, but he's so confident. He's telling me the names of the lichen. Lived here all my life and I never knew the names of the lichen and why they were the different colors they were. But Katmai, not even 5 years old, could tell me all about it.
So we're going to start out out at the tip of the Kenai Peninsula and then work our way all the way around to Cape Douglas. And the practicalities of our start and end point is that both of them are quite remote, although we're going through a lot of places with a lot of people. And we've been talking to a fisherman here in town. He's willing to let us hitch a ride. He's going to be headed out pretty near to where we wanted to start. So he's going to drop us off actually about a half mile from shore in the pack rafts. And we'll paddle ashore and head on along the coast.
shady spot where animals are fighting.
Yeah? What kind of animals?
One called tongue-of-fightus. Others the first elephants.
Wow.
That looked like that were small rat-like varmints.
I see.
Well, you don't ever get to make a decision about a kid's development. You just get to make a decision about what you're doing as their parents.
Is that kind of silly, the kid gooseneck chronicle?
In our family, we really do prioritize flexibility, freedom, and getting outdoors.
I think at the simplest level, I mean, we look at what our kids are doing and what they get excited about, and then we try to figure out how do we do more of that? How do we make that more a part of their experience? And because every time they get excited about something, they're learning a tremendous amount, and I feel total confidence that they're going to learn what they need to learn by following those threads.
A lot of kids nowadays don't get to play outside and don't get to be in nature, so it's hard to describe how much different it is with their kids. They've grown up hiking. When they first got here, we took the kids out to see the ducks and chickens, and we went out on the porch to put their shoes on, and Katmai's socks were out on the porch with his boots, and I picked one up and it was sopping wet. He said, "I love wet socks." I was like, oh, okay, well, so this isn't an ordinary family.
What you up to, Katmai?
Laying on the ground.
Laying on the ground? Huh.
Okay, you going, Latuya? This is how we live now, doing these expeditions. We even kind of have a schedule, like, okay, it's good to go out every 2 years is a good time for a big expedition that's, multiple months long.
I mean, really, I guess we're really scheduled in that sense, because the kids go out on a day hike once a week. We go out every full moon for an overnight camping trip, and then every 2 years we do a several month trip.
We plan to do this as long as we can. Obviously, as the kids get older, they'll have more input. I hope they'll still want to come, and their input will be helping us pick where to go, but we'll just see how it goes.
You do come away with memories, and that's one thing that I think about, all of our trips. I mean, our first really big trip, a 2-month trip, was in 2001, and I think, I haven't tried it for a couple of years, but I'd be curious to try it, but I think I could sit down and tell you something significant that happened every day, that 60 days in 2001, like 13 years ago. You pick any other 60 days back in there that isn't another trip, I'd be screwed. So, the memories that come out of these things that is really what you take away from it.
We often host potlucks and get-togethers and discussions here at our house, and so we have a slew of people we can call. And when Hig and Erin said that they were coming, we decided that it would be good to get people that had a good concept of what the state of the world was in. So a lot of people that were authors and writers about environmental issues, as well as people who worked at environmental organizations and things like that, because they were going to be asking questions around Alaska. We wanted to make sure that they had that perspective.
Well, some of the biggest threats facing Cook Inlet are the same threats that are facing the country and the planet, and there's a climate change and ocean acidification. In a little more than a couple hundred years of the Industrial Revolution, we've taken billions and billions of tons of carbon that have been trapped in the earth over millions and millions of years, and we've liberated them into the atmosphere. And any notion that climate change isn't being aggravated by human behavior has pretty much been discounted by anybody that believes in facts and science.
How much ice will be left, and whether the ocean, the chemistry of the ocean will change what we eat out of there. Hard to know where that's going to take us, but certainly we're all going to be subject to that.
Climate change is huge in Alaska and growing huger, and we're really going to be feeling that, and also ocean acidification within 50 years. It's very possible we're going to lose our fisheries in that time frame. And even now, right now it's mid-January. It should be the coldest part of the winter. It's 40 degrees and raining. And I was just thinking a little bit ago about how that affects the snowpack in the mountains and then the salmon streams. And none of it is good.
Been over 2 weeks, well over 2 weeks. We're traveling with our kids. We're working our way along the coast, visiting people in Cook Inlet.
Went down to Bishop's Beach to see him off because, shoot, I live on Bishop's Beach. If you can't walk out your front door and go help, wish somebody farewell, then you're in sad shape. So they were going up the beach. They were luring Katmai up the beach, who must have been like 4 years old, with potato chips, And I was talking to Higgs about that. I was saying, man, it's going to take about 500 pounds of potato chips to get this kid around the inlet. He said, yeah, they work pretty good now. He said, we can't afford them in Seldovia. So he said, when we get over here, it's just like putting breadcrumbs down there. They'll come along. I mean, it's hard to motivate kids to drive 200 miles, much less walk 200 miles. You've got to find little adventures along the way, and that takes a lot of inventiveness, I think, for a parent to continually find surprises around the corner.
A lot of it comes down to kind of little details, you know, how you stay warm, and what you do with poopy diapers and things like that, and I guess that's, you know, we've spent some years and a number of expeditions out figuring out how to do this and how to enjoy ourselves out here. And
Hey, Dad, that's over.
you don't want me to put everything that's in the pot into your bowl? That would probably be too much. But I'll put a little more in, and then maybe you and I can share it. And
Share it with me.
well, you get your own bowl.
I think we're gonna start over here. I think we're gonna start over here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go woo hoo 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 all the way over there to there.
That's an interesting idea, Katmai.
Are we really gonna go there?
I don't know. I think we're going to end up over there at some point, but I don't think we'll probably follow that path.
I think you can give the state away and maybe get it back, not in good shape, with some corporations, but I don't think you can do that with oil corporations. Once you give it to them, they have some tentacles that just don't let go of whatever you've given them, and they're pretty, I'm going to use the word insidious, at getting what they want.
There's a false choice that's been created that you have to have either jobs or the environment, and that's a phony dichotomy. In Alaska, we've got world-class renewable energy resources right in our backyard. We've got some of the highest tides in the world. We've got, you know, in Anchorage, you can see a 40-plus tidal differential in 6 hours. We've got 5 active volcanoes for geothermal potential here. We've got incredible wind resources. So all it takes is the political will and the investment to move in that direction. But right now, our fossil fuel industry has a stranglehold on our politics.
Cook Inlet has a high tidal exchange, so a lot of pollution requirements, limitations in other bodies of water are not enforced here. So again, that's just taking for granted that it won't, you can keep polluting and there's not a point where it's going to affect anything.
Well, basically in the Arctic and subarctic, we're changing faster than much of the other areas of the globe. And here on the Kenai, I would argue that we are, you know, aside from the high Arctic, where you have a lot of international consortiums involved doing research, I would argue that here on the Kenai, we're probably the second best documented place for climate change effects in Alaska.
It has been a bit alarming to see shrubs rise, for example, and glaciers disappear, and animals that are really Arctic animals kind of living in a boreal environment, like the beluga whale. People wring their hands over the beluga whale, but I think the beluga whale is kind of like an alpine plant on top of a mountain. And as the climate rises, the habitat for that alpine plant is just no good anymore. It's too warm. Same thing, you know, that's causing shrubs to move upwards or glaciers to melt is making this sort of little Arctic estuary, which is kind of what this is. I think what's really hurting them is they're an Arctic species and this is not an Arctic body of water.
There is sort of this lingering idea and fear that scientists are making this up, or emails are hacked into and messages are distorted very easily by the media. So for scientists, for my position, just stay true to my message and keep seeking information about what the changes are actually happening. And things are happening faster than any of us can predict. Any of us have predicted that climate change models, we're basically blowing them out of the water, what we expect the changes to be.
I don't think there's any debate at all. You can see it coming. I mean, it's here. I mean, we're already living in it. Anybody that's lived up here very long can see what's happened up here. We got warmer winters and nice summers. I mean, there's just no comparison.
You know, and the idea that we're still going to have salmon, I wish I was a little higher in the people's mind, because I think you have to at least care for them a little. You just can't abuse all the things that they need to reproduce and to prosper and expect them to keep coming back. I think that if people would prioritize a little, they would realize that you can't do everything. You have to choose what you want.
I can remember 50 years ago, we go out and you catch kings, anywhere. The king salmon now, a king salmon is rare. You can't get kings no more, which is unfortunate because I love to eat them.
The collapse of salmon fisheries in other regions didn't happen overnight. It happened over many decades, and in some regions over many centuries. So if you look at worst case in 50 years, there'll still be salmon in Alaska. You'll still be able to come to Alaska and fish in a salmon stream. The question is really, how many rivers will you be able to do that in? How vibrant and large will the fishing industry be? How sustainable it will be? So what the trajectory is. So my worst case projection will be that 50 years from now, we'd find ourselves partway down that historical path that other regions have followed.
It's interesting because, on the whole, people are actually quite pessimistic, more than I expected. Like, almost everybody, for very different reasons, thought that the future wasn't going to be terribly rosy.
Oh, it's just right there. It's just a tiny gap. It's just got a little water on it. I think you don't want to hang out on the edge.
I think a bad scenario that is possible is that Alaska would become a catalyst for climate catastrophe, that we would accelerate our current resource extraction emphasis in our economy, and that we would go after the huge amount of coal, and that Alaska would distance itself as far as the outside political influence and allow it to basically get into a situation where it just goes whole hog for fossil fuel extraction and becomes kind of part of the reason why we experience one of a very dark future of climate disruption and economic collapse.
Maybe a little biased because I live on Cook Inlet, but we sort of called this trip when we did it the Heart of Alaska because it has parts of every aspect of the state I find fascinating.
we try to live simply because we have to carry everything we need, and we actually are pretty limited there because we have 4 of us, the 2 kids, and then me and Erin, and one of the kids needs to be carried themselves. Latuya's getting carried, and so we only have 1 backpack. And we have some other pouches that we wear on front and back, that sort of thing, and so we really have to be pretty selective about what it is that we put in those spaces.
So it looks like we went 3 miles.
The upper inlet is a place where actually that's where most of the people live around Anchorage, and most of them are terrified of this part of Cook Inlet that surrounds them and never go out there. And that's because Turnagain Arm and Knik Arm have really strong, powerful tidal currents and also a lot of quicksand mud along the shores. And so we had to deal with both of those things.
I got a call one day that they were passing Kenai, so I decided to go out and try to meet up with them out at Gull Rock, out of Hope, Alaska. So I went out there and ended up spending a night because they got slowed down a little bit right at the mudflats before they got to Gull Rock. And then the next day they paddled up and I went all the way from there around to Portage with them. It was really entertaining because, he was really into, Columbian mastodons or something, but then all of a sudden they'd get these new features and he'd be telling you about it and telling you what they could do with the scenery around them. Like, that they could jump over that mountain or they could go from this side of the arm and back in however many seconds. And that was really, really interesting because it added another level of imagination to the trip that with adults you just wouldn't get.
A what?
A mudadon in the sea.
A mudadon?
A mudadon.
It's pretty neat that mudadon lives here, huh? Because he's got a lot of mud.
The most interesting part of that was that we were on Turnagain Arm, which if you spend much time around Anchorage, the reputation is that Turnagain Arm is basically a death pit and you don't go there because the boar tide is going to rip you to shreds and then you're going to drown and if somehow you manage to get out of the water, well then you'll be on the mud flats and you'll be sucked into your neck and for sure killed by the next tide. It seems like it would be something that if people took a little bit of time to learn how to do responsibly, that a lot more people could be enjoying, and it's right there next to town.
A little mud flat practice as we prepare for Western Cook Inlet tide flats here, and experimenting, which we have in the past too, to pretty good effect with how inflated pack rafts, if you're dragging them around on the mud flats, are really good at helping you get unstuck from the mud. So instead of having to lay on the mud and try to figure out how to get your feet out without getting more stuck, you can just flop on the pack raft. And Katmai and I and Latuya just practiced that a few minutes ago as he was a little bit ahead of us watching the tidal bore come up the channel. We were getting stuck, I don't know, probably more than knee deep in some liquefying silt, and yelled for the pack raft and got the pack raft and just flopped right over it.
I think of Cook Inlet as kind of the border country between Anchorage at the headwaters and the great expanse of Alaska out there, and we're kind of on the edge, right here on the edge, and I always felt like being on the edge was a good place to be poised.
The longer you're out in wilderness, the more disconnected you get from the commercialism, the dependence on news, the dependence on information, the clock. And so when you get out into the wilderness and you start moving on natural time and slowing down and seeing things as they grow and move and migrate through wilderness, really shows you the importance of the dynamics of the planet. When we're in our everyday world and we get worried about whether the dishes are washed and the phone is answered and all of that kind of thing, that really has no impact on the future. But how those dynamics of nature work, our impact on those is of supreme importance. And we can't really grasp that until we're out in it. And the longer we're out in it, the deeper it sets in our awareness.
Ground truth is this idea, it's a phrase that like the military and scientists use. They spend a lot of time looking at satellite photos or whatever, trying to figure out what's going on. Ground truth is what you learn when you actually go there and see things in person.
And we started out with the idea basically because we'd take off and we'd do trips and expeditions purely for fun and find out that despite ourselves, we ended up learning a whole lot of interesting things and wanting to share those. And then later we morphed it into ground truth trekking, where we put that idea up front that we know we're going to learn things, so we're going to go out and go to places where there's interesting things to learn, which you can really only get a good picture of by seeing things in person, talking to the people who are actually out there.
Well, I think of Hig and Erin as prime examples of what to do. I see a lot of the problems with the world is that we're moving too fast, change is happening too fast, we're kind of moving at cyber speed, and we've really evolved out to be hiking and walking and interacting with the environment. So I think it's a real easy way to lose touch when you're zipping around, where if you're hiking, it's a good way to kind of get reconnected. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges is reconnecting with the earth.
Yeah, there are barnacles too.
Sunlight and in the summer air, a touch it's legendary, too beautiful for love.
welcome to Talk of Alaska. I'm Steve Heimel. The latest ground truth trek has spiraled into our studio. So I guess the first thing is the route.
So basically the idea is around Cook Inlet. And so we started off someplace called Dogfish Bay, which is a little south of Nanwalek, down on the tip of the Kenai Peninsula, which is about at the mouth. And then we came up here to Anchorage, and now we're going to go back down the west side to Cape Douglas.
We're out here to learn, and really to learn from people as we go. And we've been asking folks, everyone we meet, everyone who we can get their ear for a few minutes, what they think is coming up for Alaska in the next couple generations. So looking out a little longer than at least I would normally do in my day-to-days. So that question has been, really a theme for this trip. We've heard all manner of answers, as I'm sure you can imagine, and it's been good.
What's your picture of Cook Inlet in a generation or two?
There's the very basic answer that actually we get a lot, and it's the starting point. And I think it's probably the most important answer, and that's that we don't know. Nobody knows, of course, and I think that, and we would start there too. I think I would look to many folks that we've talked to, and some of the things they've brought up, changes in the oil economy and other resource extraction stuff, whether mining and what's going on with the fisheries. We've stayed with a lot of folks who are involved in commercial fishing, and people jump right into climate change and so on. So, I think all of those things are going to be part of that future, and that they're all going to be part of that, the real answer ultimately. And I'm sure that there are things that we're not even imagining.
Thank you so much, Hig and Erin. Happy trails for the rest of your travels.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for having us on.
What'd you find? Petrushki. Can you show me? All right.
It is. See all these stems?
Yeah.
See these few leaves on the stems?
Uh-huh.
That means it's Petrushki.
Kind of off in this area here. So that's the first channel of the Sioux. So I don't know whether we've been seeing, I don't know. Anyway, what we've been seeing is all stuff in here.
You know what river this is? What do you think? The Susitna River. That's the Big Sioux. Well, it's part of the Big Sioux. There are many parts because it's a big, big river. I'll watch with the helmet cam on, and it'll either destroy the clouds? No.
think that there is a cultural value to drawing a line in the sand at salmon streams, and it's clear that many other places we haven't done that, and that the result has been the decimation of native salmon runs.
We've got the Chewitna coal mine on the west side of Cook Inlet, about 45 miles west of Anchorage, and that project has the potential to open up all the Beluga coal fields and basically make Alaska a coal export province for decades and decades to come.
The proposed Chewitna mine, which is in the permitting stage, would actually mine through, I forget how many miles of salmon streams. It would just sort of take out, which has never been done before in Alaska, just take out entire streams, and they say they would repair them or replace them later, but that's not really something that is possible. It would involve a big dock going out into the inlet with a lot of coal dust, a lot of coal falling into the inlet, and the coal would be mined, and it's massive mine. It would be shipped to China to be burned, to send back its mercury and all of the carbon emissions that affect climate change.
Alaska's got enormous coal reserves, and if we put in the infrastructure and secure the markets for these coal mines, we're going to be producing more greenhouse gases than any other state in the nation.
Where I see the potential for Chewitna to be a bigger problem is that Alaska, that it's a big mine that's tapping into just this tiny bit of coal that on the scale of Alaska, that there is so much coal in Alaska, and that if we are, that is a step down a road. I think it's a much bigger step down the road towards massive coal development in Alaska, which is, I think, more negative than it is a step down the road towards massive salmon habitat destruction, which if we massively destroyed salmon habitat, that would be bad. But I think this is a much smaller step down that road than it is toward a step down the road towards aggressively developing Alaska's massive coal resources. My turn is almost done, and then it'll be your turn.
How did the guy get to it?
And then stand up. You know how to do that. It looks like you're a goofball.
You know, the optimism I feel is I actually think Alaska, a lot of the changes that are to come, I think Alaska is going to do pretty well with them. And the thing that I'm most pessimistic about is some of the cultures that I value very much. In a world where climate change is destroying remote communities and driving people from the lower 48 to settle in Alaska, you know, that influx of people may well help build a more diverse economy and help support the state in a lot of ways and really bring a lot of amazing, interesting people into the state that'll be awesome. But climate change is very damaging to a lot of the remote communities because of its impacts on subsistence and on the physical infrastructure. And if you combine that with this influx of outsiders, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the cultures that we have here in Alaska right now.
Well, it's a great state in that it sponsors a real individualism, and I would hope that it would maintain, you know, a high percentage of people. I'd say higher than now. To me, it looks like Alaska's just selling out to corporations. I like to see people that would say, no, that's not the way I want to live. This is the way I want to live. Because the state does allow tremendous freedom in that you can pick who you want to be and how you want to live.
So my best case scenario for Alaska in 50 years is that we don't squander our current oil wealth, you know, paying for people's retirement and health benefits. And what we really need to do with that money is sort of invest it in some sort of sustainable Alaska-based economy. So when that money is gone, we still have work to do. So it would be nice, in the best case scenario, to have an economy here that's not a resource-based economy. You know, like what I like to say to people about Alaska is we live in a 19th century environment. In other words, it's like the 1800s up here. We still have all the same animals and plants we had in the 1800s. They don't have that in the lower 48. We have a 20th century economy, which means it's booming and it's a resource-based economy, which is great for, you know, money, for work. I mean, we don't even have to pay income tax. Other places are struggling to make ends meet. We've got like wasted money. We don't even know what to do with it, so it gets squandered. You know, like if you're camping and you've got 5 lighters, you lose 4 of them. You don't keep track of your lighters till there's only 1 left. Then you're very careful with it. And people are that way with money, especially governments, I feel.
I mean, my hope would be that Alaskans would really get it together to be stewards of our place, and that we would no longer be a extractive resource colony, which we are now, and that we would build an economy on something else.
What do we want to see for our grandchildren's grandchildren? And it would be nice if they're able to see wild salmon, if they're able to see a moose.
It's not normal for us, so don't touch Katmine. I can't help you. Yeah, you do have a little sore on your back. No, you can't get up here. It really just wants to be out of the water, huh?
If we could have our own locally created power with geothermal, any other option, any of the myriad of options that we have that would be flat rate, totally renewable energies, that would be my highest dream for 50 years in the future. A more responsible way of living. I would love it if people consciously chose to go there instead of being forced to go there by declines in oil revenue and declines in oil production. So my highest hope would be that we actually did that shift consciously.
You're a beluga.
Can you tell me how that boulder got here?
It got here from mud sliding from Redoubt.
How did it get all the way to here?
The mud slid to here.
Wow. That's it's a long ways.
Wow, that's a long way. Why do you want me to tell you even though you already knew?
It's a good question, but I wanted the video to know.
I think it's probably my favorite trip I've ever been on with them. There was a pilot who offered to fly me and some gear and some resupplies for the last month of the trip. And we landed, I think it was called Spring Lake, you know, and honestly, I'm not very good with names. I mean, I could point to it on a map. Before, along the way towards Cape Douglas and Augustine. So I got dropped off there. And from there, you know, we kept going. I had a raft, you know, and all my gear, and I just joined them for that part of the trip, which was amazing. So we did a lot of rafting, which I'm fairly comfortable with. I really don't like bushwhacking, so for the kids and for me, this was perfect. You know, we had difficult weather and difficult conditions, though, often, in terms of the paddling. The rain and the wind, which is always there. But partly I had like a little single man tent, and it would often be really, really windy, and my tent would kind of like be sideways. And then we had often really too rough to raft conditions. So there were some big waves, and that got kind of scary sometimes. As well as the rain, we got pinned down a few times. I remember the worst night was I'd already put my tent away, and it started raining. And it was too rough to paddle, and so it was like, oh, we'll just hang out in our shelter for a few hours, and that ended up being over a day, and all of us in their shelter. Slippery, can you do a Sundance? Yeah. Okay, do a Sundance.
Oh, I want to see a Sundance.
Ready? Do a Sundance. Is that a Sundance? That's a Sundance.
That's just the vibration.
There's a boat coming to save us.
So, yeah, curiosity is a pretty good one. You know, I think that, you know, engagement, like just, you know, kind of trying to be a part of what's there, and, you know, part of what's going on.
And maybe a deliberate choice about what they do with their lives. I think it's easy to kind of feel like there's this path that everybody's supposed to take, and you just go through your life doing the next step and the next step. And I want them to actually choose what they want to do.
You know, I joke with Erin sometimes. I say, you know, Katmai's going to grow up, live in New York City, and never set foot outside again, which could happen. You just never know, right? I don't think it'll be true of Katmai so much, because I think he takes to it really well.
Come on. Yeah.
So I think we were just trying to get off quickly, you know, and that's where we sort of decided we'd each launch quickly, we'd, you know, pass the kids, and it didn't quite work out as planned.
Okay, Latuya. Oh, well, you know what? In a few minutes, you're going to get in Mama's pack wrap. I'm going to hold you. She's going to go out in the water. Then she'll come back and she'll get Latuya.
I think we were getting ready. We wanted to be able to go. So we hiked a certain way along the coast and then thought, you know, maybe we have a window of opportunity to launch, even though it doesn't look all that great.
Yeah, come right here. Yeah. Okay, now hold for a moment. All right, now try it. Yeah, you're doing good. Okay, you're good.
We didn't always do it that way. I think that it depended on the conditions as to whether the kids would start out in the rafts with you or you would pass them over. So if it was really rocky or there was a little bit of surf, then we would use an adult would go out in a raft first and then paddle back in, and someone would you know, put a child in the boat. And that was probably more typical than the other because there weren't that many places where it was so calm that you could just launch.
All right, that's a big one. Oh, geez.
You know, in some ways, because they've been doing this all their lives, they don't really, you know, I would have thought they would have been scared about you mean you're passing me over into a boat. But, you know, honestly, there was very little apprehension on their part. You know, they basically are totally in this position that they have to trust the adults. They have no choice, right? And they remarkably do, you know. We're going out there in big waves and they're never like, oh, is this okay? They're perfectly fine with it. And they think it's kind of fun, actually.
Okay, you're gonna go over the pack and...
Okay, Dad's gonna push us off. Ready? Woohoo!
All right!
And I do think that they do, the way they do it is intimidating, right, to a lot of people. And I know a lot of people also think they're so out there that, you know, what are they doing to these poor children, right? And having actually experienced it, they're not doing anything to their poor children that isn't perfectly fine.
It didn't immerse. Well, you know, the kid thing worked out great, but the launches, the initial launches, yours went well, but both Nikki and I got in a bit of trouble there. We're all here.
Oh, and you found a deep spot?
So they made an effort wherever they did meet people is to start that conversation. And they wanted to ask their question with the locals. They definitely stayed true to that approach. But you know, when I was with them, it was the more isolated part of the trip.
The advice that I'd have for people hoping to build a more stewardship type of place would be that whatever they're doing, that they just do it with the earth in mind and try to contribute positively and not be destroyers of what we love. I think I know most Alaskans really love what we have here and don't want it destroyed, but it's going to take some effort. So I would just encourage everyone to make whatever personal efforts they can toward that goal.
Even though our democracy has been basically hijacked by moneyed interests, we still have an opportunity to participate in local elections and state elections. Getting out and voting means a lot, learning the issues, getting engaged. It's not okay to sit around and complain about stuff if you're not going to put your hat in the ring and really participate. So I think that's the most important thing.
We should all catch our own fish, eat our own fish. Don't buy it, catch it. And then as soon as you hunt and collect your own food, it brings you closer to the environment. It makes you sort of, I don't want to get, you know, like spiritual about it, but it makes you appreciate the environment because it's producing your food. So you're going to want to protect it. If there's a disconnect between where your food comes from and you, then you can't really appreciate the fact that it's disappearing or that it's suffering. But if you have to extract it, you see that it's declining, then you're more likely to take steps to prevent that. I would say, yeah, I think more people should be berry pickers and moose hunters and dip netters and clam diggers and fill their freezers with local food. And more people should ride their bike and live close to work. And more people should try not to make as much money as they possibly can and spend more time with their kids and their friends. And I guess, I mean, it sounds awful, you know, to say this, but I think just sort of take a step back and be kind of more in tune with what's really important, you know, what we eat, who we raise, who we interact with, and less on, you know, like what our status is and how much we can have of this or that and how much money we can have.
More than an environmental crisis, we have a human relations crisis. So much of it is just cultural. How do you behave? What do you do? How do you live? Living in a small, compact way that has as little impact on the planet as possible. Every individual, no matter what, can do that. That is the most positive change you can make in the world.
I think it's hard looking into the next century to see a way that we can navigate life without either changing lifestyle or having some, some consequence that either climate change will become so severe that it will be disruptive to the economy. When we go out on a trip like this, we can completely change how we live. What we do as what you might call work, and where we live and how we live and what skills we're using on a day-to-day basis, everything changes. But one thing that doesn't change is we're still the same people. It doesn't change who we are. In a way, I think people are afraid of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think people are afraid that if they change their lifestyle, they're going to be a different person. That the person they are today would have to die for this person to live in with a different lifestyle. And we've been out as long as a year on past trips. And, I'm still the same person. I learn new things, but I'm still me, and I think that changing lifestyle is a lot easier than most people think.
have June salad and kale then, or you could have some of the same things.
I want some of the same things.
You haven't got any onions then. You could do that too.
I'm liking it. No, we went to there. We went to there. We went to that volcano. 800 miles in 3 months.
So any time that we're burning fossil fuels, we're taking carbon out of its natural sequestration as oil, coal, or natural gas, and putting it into the atmosphere as CO2. And that's what's driving climate change and ocean acidification right now. And I think this is a major problem. Now, the personal choices I make are ultimately a pretty small piece of that, but there is a value there, an inherent value. Anytime that anyone makes a choice to use fossil fuels, at this point, the costs that, if you pay whatever, $4 a gallon for gasoline, you're paying some money out of your pocket for that gasoline. But at the same time, there are people, particularly future generations and those who are particularly vulnerable to climate change, who also are paying additional money in addition to that $4. And we can say money, or we can talk in more personal terms, in terms of livelihood, lifestyle, and life. They're paying for that too. So it makes me feel better if if I'm doing something that I don't need as much help from future generations to keep my house warm, if I'm using firewood and trying to use it pretty efficiently.